Okay, so this is the shot, and it's got the two-panel view set up. The image plane's already in there, and this is the character animated on a single controller. So this is the Ray rig from Vegetarian. It's a pretty sweet rig. Nice, complicated face, like in a good way. See all the controls. So here, this is just, you can see all the keys in the timeline. This is just a single controller, just the hips, with the head follow turned off. I'll show you what it looks like with it turned on. See, the head just does everything the hips do, and then turn it off, and already, like just turning that off, everything looks way more human. It's less rotations you have to worry about. So let's look under the hood and see what it looks like in the graph editor for that single control. So I know that's always a question. So you see for translate X, translate Y, translate Z, rotation X, Y, and Z, or Z, whatever. They all have values. Not a single channel is left out. They all have something on them. And that's what makes an animation organic, is making sure you have rotations and translations on all the channels. Because that's how we move. We don't isolate our movements in any axis. We move in all six. So let's look at the curves themselves. We can take a look at the first 30 frames or so. And I want you to see how organic motion looks. I'm not suggesting that this shot is perfect by any means. There's a lot of work that went into it, and I considered it a learning experience. So I can do a lot better animation now than I could when I first started that. So I just want you to see the curves and how they kind of slow in, slow out, plateau a bit, and then just more slow in, slow out. Not everything is perfectly organic. I'm not getting that in the first 30 frames really, but if we skip ahead a little bit in the animation, you'll see little moments like this where the curves aren't perfect. This is something I would have cleaned up later, but I don't mind having a little slow in and slows out, because organic movement does that. You move fast and slow and fast and slow, and a combination of different speeds based on different tensions in the muscle and how you feel and weather conditions. It can be a hurricane, whatever. So every channel is going to have a slightly different movement, but you'll get these little moments like in here where curves aren't perfectly smooth, and that's okay. That creates almost like a micro expression or a muscle twitch or something like that. So it's good to have curves that are smooth, sure, but you also want to experiment with when you want to, I guess flat tangent's the word, is where you want the motion to kind of slow in and rest for a bit and then slow it. So you can see all throughout this piece. The graph is a little wonky, is maybe a good way to look at it. And there are certain moments here, and in later versions of the file, I would do that if I saw a curve like that. Or say, for example, I saw a curve that was like that. Then I would try to favor one side or the other. So I'd either favor the slow in or the slow out. So I will, something like here. I might do that or that. But it's already kind of favored for the slowing, so I would maybe leave it. It's one of those things too, you have to play blast a piece over and over again, and we'll get into it when I start to animate. But I just want to show you that the graph's not always perfect. You may smooth these things out, but it's okay to have plateaus and peaks and slow in and slow out here and there. That's exactly what you want for organic movement. You rarely want this, and this is something I would have definitely fixed. You don't ever want to have something that just stops, because like we said before, that's mathematically still. So you want to smooth stuff out like that. See if I can see it again. Like if you found something like this, you try to make sure that goes up or down, slowing it. This I would probably fix. But again, I'm kind of working blind here. I'm just going through the graph editor, showing you what curves will look like. Again, that's okay that that plateaus, I'm sure. I put it in there for a reason. And some parts are smooth for sure, but it's okay to have little peaks and valleys like this, where it's not quite not doing anything, but it's not perfect. It doesn't look like that. You could even do that if you were obsessed with things looking a particular way. But all that to say, the graph editor, maybe from afar, can look, you know, like nice curves, but when you look closer up, you're going to find little moments like this and little clusters of keys that maybe aren't quite perfect looking, and that's okay, like right in here. And that's all right. That's good. That's what creates the organic motion. Inorganic motion is perfectly smooth, even timing, rotations on one or two axes, translations on one or two axes. But organic movement has values everywhere, and they're not perfect. So that's what the graph editor looks like. So what we'll do now is I'll zero ray out, and I'll go from T-pose to maybe 30 or 40 frames of rotoscope-esque animation. It's not quite rotoscoped, because that's not really what you want. I mean, it depends on the shot, but you're starting that way. You're starting to rotoscope it, and then you find little bits where you're exaggerating or making it more organic, or yeah, just trying to put the acting back in instead of just copying something from life. So let's animate. Okay, so we've got Ray, and he's all zeroed out, looking all T-posy and whatnot. So we'll set this entire thing up the way I would normally set it up, and that's to get him in the first pose. So what am I looking for? I can scrub through, and I can start to get a sense of how I'm moving in the reference. So I'm moving back in Z and up in Y. We're talking about the hips too. And then if you notice here in the reference, we'll look at my shoulders. I'm rotating in X and a little bit in Y and in Z. So let's set up Ray such that he's in the first pose. So I might do this time lapse because it might be a little boring. So here we go. Okay, so here's Ray, all set up, pose done, expression. Like I said, you just have like one expression tonally for when you first start. And then obviously the face is a whole other pass. It's a whole other thing. So we're going to carve out the first 40 frames of this. Maybe not the most exciting, but it's the keep alive part. I mean, there's still that emotion that's happening there, but we're going to get the hips starting to move. So make sure you have the head follow turned off, which will give you something like this. And then I like to make this a little bit bigger with the plus and minus keys, the manipulator, so I can do it from the camera. And I'll go an amount of frames I feel comfortable with, 10, 8, 12, sometimes a full second, 24, 36, whatever. 36 is too long, so I won't describe anything over that big a time. But 10 frames seems to work. So I have my hips. Select the hips. And without even moving anything, I just like to lay a key down. Like, that was probably nothing. I didn't even need to do that, but it just kind of just gets me working. Okay, I'm gonna put a key here. So from here to here, what happens exactly? And before we said we were looking at, you know, the if you have a graphic t-shirt or whatever, the E for me is what I'm going to track. You know, you have a logo or something, just the sternum is what you're looking at. And I try to just focus on that letter right in here. So overall, I would describe that motion as going back, rotating, and then moving back in space, and then in all degrees of motion. All right, so that's pretty close. It might not look like much, but you'll see in the graph editor that it moves in all 6 channels. And you'll notice when I do the rotation, I don't grab this, then that, then the other. I grab right in the middle, because then it's going to rotate on all the axes for me. You know, and I might want to double check to make sure I have a little bit of Y in there. Okay, so I want to make sure I have values on everything. You'll notice like in here, from 1 to about, I would say 4. Now the other thing too with your reference when you export the image plane, or the image sequence to get into the image plane, you want to make sure that's at 24 frames a second. Because what can happen is between frames, you'll lose little bits of information, so you're going to have to make up the motion yourself or fill in the gaps kind of thing. So from 3 to 4, nothing happens in my video reference. So what happened at 3, I'll expand it to 4. Just pad that out by a frame. So I'm going to put a key there. Because I want it, everything's moving back okay in the right speed. But what I'm missing is some of the rotation, some of the organic movement that you're going to want to add in, both with the graph editor and manually in Maya. So what happens is there's a rotation And then now I will grab a single controller or a single channel. It's just an extra little rotation in Z there. And it's actually mostly in the torso, but I'm going to try to describe a lot of that with the hips instead first. And then it's a lot of just kind of watching your reference and seeing what rotations and translations you see over really, really small amounts of frames. So in this case, 10. And we should be able to describe this entire action. Not the entire action, but we should be able to describe a large chunk of it with a single controller. And these are like, right now, I'm just like nudging the character. Ever so slightly. All right, so I'm satisfied with that. I would refine it in the graph editor, but for now, we're just going to do it in 3D space. So from 10 to 18, looks like there's a dip. But what I want to know is from 10 to 40, how much does the character go back? How much does the reference go back? So back in Z, the Z kind of plateaus, but it still goes back, and then starts to come forward. So I'm going to set a key where I start to see it slow into and out of the next direction change. And this was, again, just a marker key here, so I'm going to delete that. So from 10 to 33 now is what I'm describing. So 23 frames of action, or 22, whatever. So he is again clicking in the middle to get that rotation. And it's kind of nudging this, and I'm not too worried about the translation, but I will get into that. And these things I'll select individually. It might be too big. So what I did there is I just nudged him over a bit because the move forward looks a little linear in the reference. So you don't want him going back to that position you just had. So you can see on my character, he's rotating over in Z. But at frame 18, that doesn't actually happen. So there's a slow out there. Jeez, that's big. Okay. Slight up movement here. Just a little value in Y. That's too much. Oops. trying to shrink this without going into the graph editor, because the graph editor kind of messes this up. This records, so. So now just finding little moments in here to increase the organic feeling of it. These little like micro body expressions. Okay, so that definitely doesn't happen there. And that's way too much. So you'll start to lay down keys, and as you go, you'll see, oh, that doesn't work, or oh, that does work. And you're just taking little tiny bits at a time. Going over it again and again and again and again until it's right. So I'm going to take that frame and nix that. That wasn't really working for me. Oops. Little nudges on every channel. So this area is not working. Come on, there we go. Trying to get like really small movements can be kind of hard sometimes, but this is definitely where you want to have the graph editor open at the same time, but that's okay. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll almost look past both the character and the reference to see what rotations are and aren't happening. So I noticed there's like a little rotation Y here that I'm not quite getting. And then that the reference comes out of here. And then this is almost like an up and over move. And there's a little bit more Y there. Not nearly as much Z. And a little bit of translation Y. Translation Y. And then again, not so much in Z. And then not a ton happens here, so I'll slow that out. Oops, ooh, too much. By frame. Ooh, even too much there, okay. All right, so let's see what we have playback. All right, so that obviously doesn't look like much, but if you apply this method over the entire piece, doing 40 frames at a time, 40 frames at a time, 40 frames at a time, you will eventually arrive at, and I'll splice in the QuickTime video, you'll eventually arrive at the single controller QuickTime And then you do the same thing for the neck and the head. And I would start with the neck first. And it's going to be a lot of little tiny movements. And the head is going to do a lot of it, so the neck might be hard to see, but it's good practice to do. Because a lot of times you work with characters that don't actually have necks. So then when you go to do it, it can be a little difficult. Because you just don't have the experience with it. So now because the neck and the head follow the body, I don't have to worry too much about the position in space because they're already doing the multi-channeled movement because it's just following the body. So now it's already got the 6 degrees of motion and you're layering on top. So now I just have to worry about what's happening in the reference. And that's not what's happening. There's that, but so it's coming over, but not quite as much. Or it's coming back, but not quite as much. So there's a little bit of head bobbing here. And you can see there's an extra frame of it. That doesn't go back. Not at 21 anyway. Does go back, just not quite so far at that frame. And then I'm going to redo these because they're not working. And I wonder, yeah, I don't want to use the torso quite yet, so we'll go up to the head. So this is going to be a little bit more complex because now this is where some acting is starting to occur. So I might look at the middle of my brow or my chin for what rotations I should put in. And again, kind of grabbing from the middle of the manipulator until I need to add like a single axis more. And again, because you've already done the hips and the head follows off, then the head and neck are already moving in those 6 degrees. So you're just layering on top. And it's these little like nudges. So gently coercing your character into these poses. At this point, it's like you're not even thinking about them as poses per se, you're thinking about them as sort of isolated movements, but they're still a part of a whole. It's just one controller is always going to kind of inform the other. Get out of here, autosave. And using the chin and the brows is good because if you look here, your clavicle thing, you know, where your shoulders go in, the dip there, you can check where your chin is against that, you know, that's like a good line. So if my chin's over here, you know, in the reference, then make sure that your character's chin is over there. And you'll get little bits in the reference where it looks like it stalls out, so you kind of have to guess what's happening, but certainly fill in the blanks. But it's going to make sense if you go, okay, what's happening there? You don't need that exact frame, you just need the idea of it. This is why it's not exactly rotoscoping. It's you filling in the blanks where the reference doesn't quite work. See, and this is a case where now I've got a frozen frame, so I have to kind of say, make a decision, because the head should be turning back by here, and it's not. So I make it turn, and try to get the timing right. So let's look at that. And then you'll see where it works and where it doesn't. And in here, I can see there's too much Z. And this is a case where I really should go in the graph editor and adjust this, but I'm not gonna, because I don't feel like it. I heard you asking yourself, why? Why? Why do you go in the graph editor? Because I don't feel like it. Oops. And going in and making sure each channel is doing what it's supposed to after you kind of laid them down. So there I could see there was too much rotation in Y too soon. So I know you're just watching it through Maya, but I'll upload the, or I'll cut in QuickTime so you can see what it looks like in real time. But that's basically how you do it. Obviously, maybe that looks easier than it is. It takes a lot of understanding what's moving when and why it's moving that way to use the layered approach. So there's a lot of study of anatomy that needs to go into it, but that's it in a nutshell. One controller at a time, set up the main pose, set up the emotional tone, and then go from there. Carve it out 10 frames at a time. That's where I started from, 1 to 10 with the hips. And you just start laying down sections, you know? Oh, it moves back in Z. Okay, well, I know I need X and Y as well, and then I need all 3 translations. So you figure out what that looks like with the reference. And it's not perfect, and you refine as you go. You play less, see it's not working, you go back and you fix it. You start adding more controllers, and all of a sudden, what you've added, what you've layered on, will change what you started with. So you go back, but because it's layered, you know, one informs the other. So that's good. You know, you want that. You do want to go back and adjust. So that's it. That's how you do it. Yeah, it takes practice. You just do it. When a shot calls for it, when it doesn't, don't worry about it. You use your overshoot and settle. You know, all that kind of fun, cartoony stuff. But when a shot requires anatomical action, that's how you do it. If you have more time, then you get to refine and refine and refine. And, you know, clients and leads and directors will have notes. And if you're pressed for time, you just breakneck, try to describe as much action as you can with as few controllers as possible. And turn the head follow off. That's it.